What if a single decision could alter the course of history? What if Hitler hadn't been appointed Germany's chancellor? Could World War II have been averted? In the aftermath of World War I, Germany was a nation licking its wounds, burdened by the weight of a punitive peace treaty and a crippling economic depression. The Treaty of Versailles had stripped it of its territories, resources, and pride. This set the stage for a powerful surge of nationalism and resentment, an environment ripe for the rise of a charismatic leader. Enter Adolf Hitler, a decorated war veteran and an art school reject who, through fiery rhetoric and promises of a resurgent Germany, ascended the ranks of the National Socialist German Workers' Party, or the Nazi Party as it's more commonly known. Hitler's speeches ignited a spark in the disenchanted German populace, his words resonating with their wounded pride and their desire for redemption. In 1933, Hitler was appointed as the Chancellor of Germany. This was a turning point, a move that would ultimately lead the world into its darkest hour. Hitler, once a fringe politician, was now one of the most powerful men in Germany. Under his leadership, Germany began to rearm, blatantly violating the terms of the Treaty of Versailles. Hitler's ambition was not limited to mere rearmament, however. In 1938, he orchestrated the Anschluss, the annexation of Austria, his home country, into the Third Reich. This was followed by the seizure of the Sudetenland, a region of Czechoslovakia heavily populated by ethnic Germans. These actions were met with condemnation, but little real resistance from the international community. The world watched as Hitler systematically dismantled the Treaty of Versailles, expanding German territories and power. This passive response from the world powers only emboldened Hitler further, making him believe he could redraw the map of Europe without consequence. And thus, the stage was set for a war that would engulf the entire world. The world was on the brink, and a single spark would ignite the powder keg that was Europe in the late 30s. On September 1st, 1939, the world held its breath as Hitler's forces invaded Poland, marking the beginning of World War II. As the gears of war started turning, Hitler devised a military strategy that would shock the world. This strategy was known as the Blitzkrieg, or Lightning War. The Blitzkrieg was a swift and brutal attack strategy designed to disorient and crush the enemy before they even had a chance to react. The Blitzkrieg was first implemented in Poland with devastating effectiveness. The Polish army, taken by surprise, was unable to mount a substantial resistance. Within a month, Poland had fallen to the Nazi force. As the world watched in stunned silence, Hitler's forces turned their sights to the west. France, a bastion of democracy and a symbol of resistance against German aggression in the First World War, was next on Hitler's list. In May 1940, the Nazi war machine rolled into France. Despite a valiant defense by the French and British forces, the German Blitzkrieg proved too overwhelming. By June, France had fallen. Hitler's victory seemed swift and decisive, leaving the world in a state of shock. But Hitler wasn't done. In a move that would prove to be a significant turning point in the war, he broke the non-aggression pact with the Soviet Union. On June 22, 1941, Hitler launched Operation Barbarossa, the largest military invasion in history, against the Soviets. This decision would have far-reaching consequences as it opened up a new front in the war, stretching the German forces thin and ultimately leading to a shift in the balance of power. As Hitler's forces marched across Europe, the world watched in horror. Countries fell like dominoes to the Nazi war machine. It seemed for a time that nothing could stand in Hitler's way. The world watched in horror as the Nazi war machine seemed unstoppable. But like the tide, fortunes in war can turn. Hitler's ambition had extended his forces too thin, and the cracks began to appear. As the Second World War continued, it became evident that the Third Reich had bitten off more than it could chew. This was particularly apparent during the failed invasion of the Soviet Union. Hitler, underestimating the Russian resolve in the cruel winter, launched Operation Barbarossa. What was initially a swift and successful invasion soon turned disastrous. The German forces, ill-prepared for the harsh Russian winter, found themselves stranded and suffering heavy losses. This pivotal failure marked a significant turning point in the war. The Third Reich, which had previously seemed invincible, had shown its first signs of vulnerability. But the turning tides were not solely due to the failed invasion of the Soviet Union. They were also due in part to the entrance of a new player on the global stage, the United States. The bombing of Pearl Harbor had drawn the United States into the fray. With its industrial might and military power, the United States provided a much-needed boost to the Allied forces. The entrance of the United States into the war marked a significant shift in the balance of power. The Allies, once on the back foot, found new strength and resolve. But perhaps the most significant event in the turning of the tides was the Allied invasion of Normandy, known as D-Day. This massive and daring operation marked the beginning of the end for Hitler's Third Reich. The Allies were able to establish a foothold in Europe, and from there they pushed back against the German forces. The tide had indeed turned. What had once seemed like a German victory was now far from certain. The once mighty Third Reich was now on the defensive. The turning tides of the Second World War were a testament to the unpredictability of war and the dangers of overreach. In the face of inevitable defeat, Hitler made a decision that would seal his fate. As the winds of war shifted, Hitler found himself cornered. The final months of World War II saw a rapid disintegration of the Nazi regime, and the once formidable leader was now a shadow of his former self. Hitler retreated to the Führerbunker, an underground complex beneath the Chancellery in Berlin. The bunker, originally designed as an air raid shelter, became the last refuge for a leader on the brink of defeat. Here, Hitler spent his final days, isolated and anxious, as the world outside crumbled. Hitler's mental and physical health was in rapid decline. He was plagued by Parkinson's disease, his hands trembled uncontrollably, and his mental state was increasingly erratic. Yet, even in his final days, Hitler refused to accept defeat. He continued to issue orders, most of which were ignored by his generals who knew the end was near. On April 30th, 1945, Hitler made his final decision. He and his newly wedded wife, Eva Braun, committed suicide in the bunker's living room. Braun took cyanide while Hitler shot himself. Their bodies were later found by their aides, and following Hitler's orders, they were burned in the Chancellery garden. The news of Hitler's death spread quickly. A wave of relief washed over the Allied forces, but the war was not over yet. It took another week before Admiral Karl Donitz, Hitler's appointed successor, announced Germany's unconditional surrender. On May 8, 1945, the war in Europe was officially over. The world breathed a collective sigh of relief. The end of the war marked a new era. A world torn apart by conflict began its slow journey towards healing. The ashes of war bore witness to the horrors of the Holocaust, the devastation of entire cities, and the loss of millions of lives. The world was finally free from the clutches of a tyrant. In the ashes of war, the world would never be the same again. World War II ended, but the scars it left on the world, physical and emotional, were indelible. The globe had witnessed the havoc unleashed by human ambition gone astray, forever reminding us of the raw, devastating power of war. In the ashes of this great conflict, the world sought to create a bulwark against such disaster recurring. The United Nations was born out of this collective desire for peace. Its mission was, and continues to be, to promote international cooperation and to prevent future wars. The birth of this organization symbolized a new era of diplomatic relations, a beacon of hope amid the ruins. Yet, even as the world banded together, new tensions surfaced. The end of World War II didn't just mark the fall of Hitler and the Third Reich, it also marked the beginning of a new kind of conflict, the Cold War. Former allies found themselves on opposite sides of an ideological divide. The world, it seemed, was destined to remain in the shadow of conflict. The legacy of Hitler, a man who rose from obscurity to nearly conquer the world, was a chilling reminder of the destructive potential of unchecked power and ambition. His rise and fall served as a stark lesson for the world. It underscored the consequences of complacency in the face of tyranny and the dangers of ignoring the rise of extremism. The world had paid a heavy price to learn this lesson. And yet, in the face of such adversity, humanity proved its resilience. Nations rebuilt, people healed, and societies evolved. The world refused to be defined by the war, but chose instead to learn from it, to grow stronger, to strive for a future where such atrocities could never happen again. As we remember World War II, we are reminded of the cost of ambition unchecked and the importance of standing up to tyranny, no matter the cost. The lessons of the past continue to echo, serving as a guiding light for our journey into the future.